fascinating panel. And I did have two very immediate reactions to the data that stemmed from coverage of U.S. politics. Number one, as your data show, there's a broader support for the precepts of globalization than a lot of the conventional wisdom holds. And there was just a new NBC Wall Street Journal poll that showed a lot of counterintuitive results about American views on immigration and trade that it got buried with all the news about Trump's job approval rating. But there was a double-digit spike in support of freer trade and also in support of more liberalized immigration policy. In fact, it was a 2-to-1 margin in a very well-worded question that the NBC Wall Street Journal pollsters asked about support for more liberalized immigration policy versus what Trump has at least said with his rhetoric. And it goes to show, it demonstrates a very important point when analyzing public opinion data, especially in the United States at a time when we're very, very polarized. A lot of people who don't follow policy, as you suggested earlier, very closely, will just oppose something that they think that the current president or the current leadership supports. So President Obama was fully supportive of freer trade, the Pacific Trade Agreement, liberalized immigration policy. So there was naturally a widening and broadening opposition when his job approval numbers were going down. But now that President Trump is president and has a wholly different views on those subjects, you're actually finding a spike in support for those very issues that provide the fuel for globalization. So it's easy to overread policy questions when it comes to polling, but the broad picture, both in the U.S. and internationally, is over time a widespread support for globalization, for that agenda. And I think that we're actually seeing a spike in support at this time, just because it's a reaction to the deep antipathy that many have expressed towards President Trump, Democratic base, and also not just the Democrats, but as we've seen, there's a big Georgia congressional election in a very affluent Republican district in the suburbs of Atlanta, filled with Fortune 100 companies like Coca-Cola, Home Depot. It's a very fascinating political science experiment in how this type of voter, which has traditionally voted Republican, doesn't view Trump all that favorably, is looking at all these big issues, and it's divided. It's 50-50, and we're having a runoff coming up in June. So there's clear momentum for that traditional Republican or traditional neoliberal agenda that has been displayed at the ballot box just in the last few weeks. So I think that it's always easy to kind of come up with snap analyses. Trump is president, so there's a populist wave in the country. When in reality, public opinion on these complicated policy issues is a lot more nuanced. The other thing that I just, when I was looking at Bob presenting the data that I thought was fascinating is the most pessimistic countries towards globalization are ones, I think it was France and Belgium, that were the two at the bottom of the list. And partly it's their histories, their view of economics, but there's also a national security component to this as well. And I mean, France and Belgium have sustained in recent years some of the worst terrorist attacks. That kind of correlates with the public's view of globalization. When you listen to Le Pen's rhetoric on the French campaign trail, a lot of it has to do with immigration and who they're letting in the country, and it's connected to terrorism. So I do think that you can't disconnect the national security component from the view on economics. I think they go hand in hand, and if people felt more secure, their view of freer trade, more open borders would be much more positive. And that's also here true in the United States. I just wrote, in fact, today about a really comprehensive survey of Trump voters conducted by Public Opinion Strategies, a very prominent Republican firm
where I actually
very well. Yeah. But the most surprising finding, as I wrote from that deep dive analysis, it's a focus group and a poll of 1,000 Trump voters, was that by nearly a 2-to-1 margin, Trump voters ranked national security issues ahead of economic issues broadly. In fact, terrorism ranked number one, but ahead, I think it was by 5 points ahead of the economy and taxes combined as a top issue. So I do think that you can't ignore the fear. I mean, it's not just economic anxiety, it's safety and security, and that extends beyond the most conservative, most populist Trump voters. It goes towards security bonds, as a lot of Republican pollsters have been talking about in recent days. I've been stunned that, for example, the Iran deal is likely to reemerge in a big way in the midterm elections. Republicans are polling, doing focus groups, and they're finding that it's actually resonating quite a bit beyond their base, and actually winning over these college-educated women who are very pro-business, very pro-globalization, but have very serious worries about their family's safety and security as a result of national security issues. And I think that's sort of and that's also a Democratic blind spot, because we live in such polarized times. The polling shows Republicans are from Mars, Democrats are from Venus. Republicans rank national security as a very serious issue, and for Democrats, in most polls I've seen, it ranks below climate change, and it's, I think, 5th or 6th on the list of most important issues. And I think that's one thing that does that does have some appeal to persuadable voters in the United States, that can really, once politicians can at least feel the concerns that voters have towards their own personal security, they can actually talk about the economic issues much more persuasively.
So the Republicans are moving towards supporting the Iran deal, or against?
I mean, not so much about the deal. The politics of that
the country
is more about fear of what happened in the past, and exploiting that for their own political gain. Really quickly, just about the politics today. As a journalist, as an analyst, it's fascinating to see the Republican Party essentially split in two. You have you have a sort of what I would call GOP classic and GOP light, with Paul Ryan sort of being the leader of the traditional Republican wing, and Trump with his very vague worldview, if he even has a worldview, representing the more populist element of the party. But where it gets really scrambled is the fact that Trump doesn't really have a set of core beliefs makes his supporters all the more confused. So you have these, the conservative Republicans in Congress, basically felt that they could get accomplishments on the Supreme Court, on taxes, on healthcare, repeal and reform, by kind of using the Trump base, and their energy to kind of get their priorities passed and accomplished. But what we've seen in the last month, and what is likely to dog this administration and the Republican Party going into the midterms, is it's a lot easier said than done. And Trump, the very fact that you have Trump, who ran on this platform of populism, on pulling out of NAFTA, withdrawing from trade deals, on building a wall, and now he's relying on the advice and is shifting his policy on these very issues. The Goldman Sachs wing of the administration, folks like Gary Cohn and Dina Powell, who are very effective and very, very powerful knife fighters in this administration. It's really scrambling the calculus of a lot of these Trump supporters who voted for him for other reasons. The poll that I was talking about from Public Opinion Strategy suggested that Trump voters don't care about the issues as much as they do about his pose. And there was one question where it gave 4 choices on why they liked Trump the most. And one was issues, one was the fact that he was a political outsider, one was, I think, his position on trade and immigration, and one was he's not politically correct. He actually basically says things that people think but don't want to say. 48%, 2-to-1 plurality, picked the last option as to why they supported Trump, and over 90% said they still support Trump, even though he's had a very rocky, I would say, 100 days. That suggests to me that Republicans face challenges. I think it's going to be a very rocky midterm election because you have this identity crisis within the Republican Party. But I would not dismiss, if Trump decides to run for re-election and we don't have an economic crisis or recession, once Democrats nominate someone and it becomes a choice between two visions, I would not count Trump's view and Trump's popularity with his base, his fairly sizable base. I would not count that out. And it goes back to what I said from the outset. A lot of this isn't about policy. A lot of this isn't about the nitty-gritty of where voters stand on trade and where they stand on immigration and where they stand on the economy. It's a pose. It's who they are more culturally comfortable with. And I think that is vital to understand, for politicians on both sides to understand. There's a way to get broad support for policies if you have compassion and empathy for people on the opposite cultural side of the aisle.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think, commentators have noted the merger of entertainment and politics and spectacle. And, I think we're seeing it all around the world. You get Berlusconi and others. Quick question for the group before we turn it over to the audience real quick. And this is sort of the X factor of everything we've been talking about, which is technology. In our research, we asked people all around the world if they thought their company would be around in 20 years, if they thought their job would be around. We have an automation index, and because we have 30,000 people we talked to, we broke it by the sector they work in. So we found that 23% of people that work in manufacturing globally believe that their job will be automated. That's robots, industrial robots. The second and third, tie for second and third sectors were financial services and mining, robots and algorithms. And so, just interested in the group's thoughts, to what extent does automation impact our discussions around international trade and impact the political landscape?
Okay, yeah, this is the topic I'm supposed to talk about. So, it's interesting. I mean, the first part, as I heard your question, Bob, was, how is trade and technology linked? And I heard of someone saying, I think this turns out to be roughly right, is that something like 80%, 20% of the dislocation in labor markets in, let's say, the transatlantic community, let's just keep it there where it's safer, as to be true, is generated by trade, and 80% of this disruption in labor markets is technology. And so we've had this debate in the U.S. at the election about trade, and not much at all said about technology, when in fact that's the big thing. And so to prepare for the Vision 20 meeting and the Hamburg G20, a friend of mine and I focused on labor issues. I focused on trying to figure out ways that we could incentivate private investment in skill development and training. And Roger Burkhardt, a friend of mine who has experience as a CEO in a software, two times has been head of software companies, and was chief technology officer of the New York Stock Exchange, wrote a short paper, which I'm going to give to all you guys to distribute, both our papers. Rogers did a paper on artificial intelligence, and sort of where we came, what he's educated me about, which you probably all are aware of, is the fact that this is the tsunami that's in front of us. I mean, this is something that's already a problem, but this is a wave. And what Roger points out, which I'm sure you understand, but I didn't fully, is that if you think about it, the Industrial Revolution machines, which took years to design and years to make, and were very lumpy, big investments, so they took time and money to to replace workers. You now have software, which once it's done, is cheap and, more importantly, instant.
And learns quickly.
Yeah, and so this, instead of, as Roger educated me, instead of the curve being like this, it's a cliff. Is that as soon as you get the software, for example, apparently in the insurance business, there's ways of software of validating documents. As soon as you get that software done, it costs $10 a piece, and once the companies buy and put it in place, tens of thousands of people probably work it within a week, right? I mean, so it's a whole different phenomenon. So Roger's answer to this is that that it's a political answer. You have to get ahead of it. And so the way you do that, the thing we came up with was that you form social partnerships involving business, labor, stakeholders in society, and governments, and international organizations and experts and people who can think about this and get it done. I mean, just get out in front of it, have alert systems so you understand in which industries and what regions and what localities are going to get hit, and you get people prepared in whatever way they can think of to deal with it. So it's a completely different tariff. It's not tariffs and trade. It's not, right? It's a completely, you probably all understand this better than I, but Rogers really brought this forward in the G20 thing and there's a whole track. I think there's a whole group of people doing digital work for the Germans for the G20 summit. So we expect something good on that front as well. But again, you've got to these guys have got to think how to take this very wonky subject and talk turkey to people so that it sings in public.
So I was actually just in Dubai maybe a month ago at the World Government Summit, and it was super interesting because the conversation there was, yeah, things are going to automate. What does that mean for us? What do we do if a lot of things can be done by something else? And really, at the end of the day, what people want is to be happy. And so we have to decide, how do we want to spend our time if we have more of it? What is it we want to build? What does the world look like? Because there are things that can and should be automated. And then there are all the other things. And there are a lot of other things. And so I sit also on the UN High-Level Panel on Women's Economic Empowerment, which is fascinating because there's 20 of us. It's the head of the World Bank, it's the head of the UN, it's the head of the IMF, it's the president of IKEA, that's the president of Costa Rica, a really interesting group of public, private sector, civil society, thinking about what could the world look like if it was inclusive? What would happen if we met the goals for SDG 5 for equality and inclusive growth? And then I also sit on the B20, and Jack Ma was our chair for the SME Development Group last year, and it was fascinating to listen to him talk about how can technology that poses so many threats also create so much opportunity, because for him, it flattens a lot of things. It creates opportunities for women and other underutilized groups and other communities in developing countries to succeed in a way that, as equals, in a way they never could in the past without these platforms. And then Jack Ma, his secret to success, he said, was the role of women, because they're half the population in China, and he figured out that if he gets women in the most remote villages to understand technology and to help the local people buy stuff using technology platforms, all of a sudden infrastructure comes. Roads get built, buildings get built, water gets cleaned and is readily available, and so is fuel and other things. So now he's working with the head of the World Bank to figure out how they bring that model to Africa, to build infrastructure using technology. And so I just think we have to recognize that technology, just like globalization, isn't good or bad. It's what we choose to do with it and how we choose to steer it. And at the end of the day, it's human beings that use these things to figure out models for how we engage and how we create a world that we want. So I'm very optimistic.
Just really quickly on the political side, I think short-term automation is the political ramifications, the economic ramifications are sort of baked in the cake politically, and we saw that with the results of the 2016 election, where you had these small towns that have suffered a lot of economic dislocation in the Rust Belt and Scranton, Erie, throughout the Midwest. You saw a rapid shift away from working class voters, away from the Democratic Party towards the Republicans. Joe Biden's hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is a Democratic stronghold for many, many years, swung about as wildly towards the Republicans as any area of the country. And a lot of it is because of the economics, change in economics, automation, and so on. I do think you hit on a very important point. Are people happy? Like, ultimately, this doesn't matter if it's we're becoming more productive, if people are getting better jobs, even if they're not, but they're feeling more fulfilled. The challenge, I think, is people aren't feeling happy. There's an opioid crisis in much of the country in the United States. People are feeling lost. The ramifications of automation, at least in the short term, is creating a massive sense of not feeling happy. And the challenge politically is to find solutions to bridge the gap, bridge the transition between what's economically inevitable. And there's no easy answer. I was struck when I was in New Hampshire for a large part of the presidential primary season, how Republicans and Democrats alike were surprised when the question of the opioid crisis came up, and they didn't even know it was an issue until it came up at these town hall events. So they go hand in hand. The economy and feeling happy and feeling fulfilled, I think, go hand in hand, and that's an essential challenge for politicians to address and deal with and fix as we go through this period of disruption and transition.
It's interesting, if you look at the data, there are different views. One view says that automation grows geometrically very quickly, and it throws a lot of people out of work very quickly. And so the view there is that you need to have coordinated government policy to ensure that there's job training so people can reskill and get new jobs and take new jobs that will be created. And that's a somewhat optimistic view, because it assumes that like other ways of automation, New jobs are created. So, you know, today when you leave here, you'll probably go back to your office and take a drone elevator, an automated elevator, because elevators used to be operated by humans. You'll take an automated elevator up, but, you know, we don't talk about the people that used to operate elevators anymore because they have other jobs, right? Or the telephone operators, any of those other people. That's an optimistic view. The negative view is that you just don't need a lot of humans for jobs, and that you won't in the future, and then a lot of people will be unemployed, underclass. And that view tends to end up in universal basic income pretty fast, you know. And then there's this third view, the technologist view you hear a lot in the Bay Area, which is thank God. Let's automate away all the drudgery and let's do jobs that make people more human again, which is an interesting argument. I don't know which one of those three is right, but I know it's something our political class is going to have to grapple with.
I was going to say, I was once more in the last camp, but after going on the campaign trail and even talking, I was struck after Trump's election, talking to free market conservative groups who were sort of shell-shocked at the results and readjusting their philosophy on economic policy. The Heritage Foundation, for example, I met with the head of their political arm right after the election. And they've been the most fundamental, you know, they've been hardline, free market, you know, opposing anything that smacks of government involvement in the economy. And the head of their political arm was saying, we need to rethink things. I haven't wrote about this at the time, but we need to rethink things. We actually need to make people feel fulfilled in addition to satisfying our core ideological beliefs. So, I mean, I think that is a really fundamental question in the coming years on how politicians react and recalibrate their messages to react to the public.
Great. Well, let's open it to questions on the floor real quick, because I think we're running up against time or overtime. So.
We are running it. We have about 15 minutes.
Okay, great.
We have a mic runner.